The Kickback Show. What's in your cup?
A whole lot of everything. Kickback Show.
I feel you.
I'm at the highest level of frustration. And there's so many things to say and so many things to unravel that it could be overwhelming, but here we are. Not even sure where to start. I mean, clearly everybody knows about the situation and everything that happened and everything that's transpiring. But I don't know. Like I've been having a lot of great conversations the past week, and a lot of it has caused me to reflect upon myself in a sense of my art and my direction, and the things that I do, the things that we do on the show, the stuff that we talk about on the show, the work that we put in outside of this show, just in our own individual lives and workspaces and all of that. And I think a lot of the frustration that we felt and a lot of the things that we've talked about over the course of the last 6 years that we've done this show is now visible to the rest of the world.
Yep.
There was a point in time where there was a point in time where I wanted this show to cater to a white audience, and it grew to the point to where, and by a white audience, it was commercial success, thinking that that's where the money was, and that's where the success was. And within a year of doing this, the way that we've been doing it now, that all flew out the window, because I realized, like, our Blackness needs to be seen and heard, and it needs to be unfiltered. It needs to be what the rest of the world isn't showing, and it doesn't need to cater to anybody else. And that's just being Black. And these last few conversations that I've had has not only revealed a lot more to me of digging deeper into my Blackness, which again, that's something that we've been doing. Even our off-air conversations have been wellness, has been wealth, has been, I mean, not even off-air, it's been on air. We've had many people that have talked about all of these things that ultimately can serve as a game plan for us disengaging within the current system and applying ourselves to being independent as a Black community. With that, to finish my thought, I have become so anti everything else that's not Black. And by that, I mean getting in the car a minute ago, hearing Frank Sinatra on the radio and completely turning it off, like being disgusted within 30 seconds, and not being sorry for it, and hoping and wishing and praying that everybody is offended by it. Like, I know that there's a fine line that I'm walking on, and it's out of emotion, and I really don't care. Like, I want all smoke. But at the same token, I understand that being destructive in my nature, that can defeat a bigger purpose.
Yeah.
And it's more embracing what exists. Like I've been listening to Ray Charles and just kind of getting away from all the videos being sent to me and just everything, because it's ultimately a shock drill. Being black, loving your blackness, embracing your blackness, and by this I'm not talking about an ethnicity or nationality. We all know that we come from different spaces, whether you're from the islands, from the motherland, you know, our diaspora is broad. I'm talking about blackness in the sense of unity and all of us identifying together as one thing. I have never felt the amount of passion and fervor that I feel, that I have felt in this last week. I have been disgusted by seeing individuals. I have, again, taken like this rah-rah mentality that I have, and I've been trying to fight projecting it on people, because I'm trying to observe to see where people are at, meaning close friends of mine that aren't black, close friends of mine that have been silent, like close friends of mine that haven't said nothing, that haven't taken a stance, or you know, are just in it for the hoopla. They're just in it just because it's, oh, this look cool on Instagram or Facebook, or just make something cool or whatever. Like I want all smoke, and by that, like, not necessarily anything violent, but let's have a conversation. Like, let's talk. Are you really listening? Are you really, like, what are you doing? Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Like, don't talk to me about going out and protesting. I don't want to hear shit. Like, I don't want to hear shit that's outside of your actions towards reversing this system. Now, with these current events of all the rioting and looting and all of that, like, I'm not for that. You'll never hear me talk about going to a protest. Protesting isn't for me, because knowing my nature, I'll be out there bucking shit. Like, and it's not healthy. Instead, having this platform, doing what we're doing, is our activism. The artwork that we do is our activism. I've been a part of a play for the past 6, 7 years, 8 years, 9 years. Started in 2011. It's been 9 years going on that I've been doing this play that has addressed this very issue that we're dealing and struggling with now, right? Don't talk to me about being on the front line. Like, we've been doing this for a while, right?
Yeah.
And the frustration, again, that I've been fighting back is seeing this not only happen again, and knowing that this has happened to all of us, right? And it could have been all of us, but the fact that it exists and people are still questioning things. People are still doubting. You know, people are still still don't get it, right? And by people, I mean the masses. People that are still subscribing to, like, you being white and not understanding your privilege, and you being white and not utilizing your privilege to be able to have a voice to change systemic oppression, racism, right? And I use the two very distinctly, because the racism is against those that are black or people of color, and it's a bigger picture. And then systemic oppression is more where you fall into the classism, where that affects people that aren't necessarily people of color, right? Just wanted to reiterate that. I love seeing that everything is burning. I love the energy of it, because I get it. At the same token, it diminishes your voice, and it takes away from the bigger agenda of trying to create social change by doing that, because you are ultimately destroying your entire motive. Like, the people that you need to listen to, you aren't listening because of all of that. And to be fair, It's not us. We not burning. We ain't burning shit.
Yeah.
We're not looting. It's not us. And those of us that are black or people of color that are doing it have been provoked by those that aren't black. And there's video evidence to prove it.
Yep.
Like I'm all for I'm not against anybody that's out there protesting, because if that's the way that you do it, then do that. You know what I mean? Again, it's not for me personally.
Yeah.
But at the same token, if you're gonna do it, if you're gonna protest, have a game plan. Like, understand why you're out there. And part of the reason why I'm against a lot of the protesting and have never been for it, it's like, what we doing afterwards?
Yeah.
Like, what's the game? What's the game plan? Like, a protest is meant, for me, it's meant to bring awareness to an issue. Who doesn't know about this shit that's going on? Who don't know? Who doesn't know?
I will say that I do appreciate the protests in this instance specifically, because the cop that killed Floyd was arrested pretty quickly thereafter, and I feel like they would have dragged it on and he would have still been sitting at home had they not seen that people are pissed and they're ready to burn shit down.
Which and I agree,
but it shouldn't be that way.
But and what upsets me though is this ain't his first trip.
No,
you know what I'm saying? Like,
it is though. It never is. And he was so cavalier. He was kneeling on him with his hands in his pockets, chilling, like he's waiting for the bus or something. Like, this is what I do, and knew in his heart of hearts that he was going to do this with impunity, with no consequences expected, no nothing, because he had done it before and he had gotten away with it before. I mean, I don't know what exactly his history is. I didn't read that. I don't know that he's killed anyone before, but obviously he has a record of abuses.
He's been involved in a police chase that resulted in a car crash that killed 3 people. He's been involved in 2 other shootings, one with a Latino guy who died and a black man who was shot, but I believe survived, if I remember correctly. I think for me, what I want people to realize is we saw the video of his knee in George Floyd's neck for over 9 minutes, close to 10 minutes. And that young lady started the video and he already had his knee on his neck. So we don't even know how long prior to that young lady's video that his knee was in George Floyd's neck. That's number 1. 2, as I watched it, I can't count how many times I saw him reposition his knee, and the expression on I'm big on body language. So watching him readjust his knee countless times, and his facial expressions in terms of, like, as the young brother was standing there, saying like, look, I've gone to the academy, I've done the training, I know what you're doing, like, you're cutting off his circulation and his air supply. As that guy was repeating that, I'm watching the cop's body language and his facial expressions, and it seemed like he was like, oh, you're right, and I'm going to keep repositioning because I'm dead set on ending this guy's life right here, right now. And
just because.
And, once the paramedics took George Floyd away and all the cops, walked away, like, I'm watching body language, right? They're so casual, like they've done this before, 1. And 2, it's one of those, like, he seemed like he was getting off on it.
Yeah.
Like TMI maybe, but check the man's draws. Did he freaking, was he self-pleasuring himself by ending this guy's life? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was one of those where, like, this is, murder and lynching in broad daylight at its finest. And what what I also want people to kind of realize, like, you know, who either haven't seen the video or maybe they've only seen a small clip of it on the news. One, I'm sick and tired of like the news playing Ahmaud Arbery's death over and over from start to finish. Like, we understand, we get it. Let's not keep showing that because it just desensitizes people even more.
Right.
But with George Floyd's case, the fact that it was at least 9 minutes and 40 something seconds, if I remember correctly, from what we saw of that young lady's video, like a lot of the news stations are only showing like, you know, a short snippet of it, which I get because it's a long video, it becomes graphic, but in condensing it down, you know, our white counterparts, you know, Asians, all the other ethnicities out there, they don't become as enraged because they don't see the length of time that this man had to endure that severe treatment and punishment and judgment and, you know, a death sentence. Like,
all because a clerk thought he saw something that he didn't even see.
And I don't even know if this is accurate, but it turns out like the alleged forged money or whatever, like, turned out to be real, at least from what I've heard. So again, I don't know the accuracy on that, but you know, it's like, it's beside the point. Like, even
it
if
doesn't justify him losing his life.
Exactly.
Yeah,
even if it was supposed to go to trial, you don't have your trial, your conviction and your sentencing, your death sentence there on a spot done by 4 officers.
Well,
like,
but not only that, even if he had gone to trial and say what he did was something against the law, the sentence for that is not death.
Exactly.
It's a fine, maybe. But he was innocent.
And I mean, and that's so. I know I went on a rant. I'm gonna try to organize all of my thoughts so I'm not just.
Before we jumped on, like I had several different thoughts from several angles going through my head. So like,
yeah.
I think the audience needs to kind of bear with us as we might go.
We might go all over the place, and I just want to say thank you to the audience for your support. Hopefully everyone is safe and taking care of themselves. And despite where you are in the world or how this affects you, I'm hoping that you're taking the proper steps, and as we always say, do your research and be effective when it comes to being a part of this issue and this movement. I want to start off by saying the main issue that I have is with policing, with the system of policing. I think that needs to be said, especially for those that are watching that may not be aware. If you're new to our show or you've been here for a minute, like, we've talked about this before. We've actually had former officers on our show to talk about issues in the past. Shout out to, Officer Anthony. And when you do your research, you understand that the system of policing came from slavery.
Yeah.
The first police force was actually to bring the slaves back in and keep them in check and keep them in order. Fast forward to make it personal in California, when in the 60s, when they was kicking everything up, they were busing in officers and former military from the South to come out here to try to get things under control. So this is the system that we're dealing with. These officers that you have in certain communities like George Floyd and the countless amount of others, the LAPD, the NYPD, like a lot of the ones that we hear these stories about, a lot of times they don't come from the communities in which they police, which makes it easier for them to dehumanize the individuals that live there, right? Now, it's easy to cliche and say, oh, there are good officers and all of that. We know that. The world knows that. I have a brother of mine whose father is a really great guy. Matter of fact, my brother, he has 3 generations of officers. His grandfather was worked security for Martin Luther King. You know what I mean? His dad was a lieutenant in Pasadena. His brother, just recently joined the force. Needless to say that there's good officers out there, and they all black, right? There's good officers, and they're trying to do well. And it's unfair because they kind of get thrown under the generalization, under this umbrella of bad policing because of one bad officer. Yeah. You know what I mean? And we don't understand the fight that they're going through with inside the belly of the beast. But what I'm hoping that those of you watching that's seeing everything like, the destruction and the vandalism and the looting and the criminal, the criminal activity is not what we're condoning, right? But at the same token, it's a systemic thing that ultimately is bringing out a lot of this rage and frustration, because it's certain aspects of policing that we have suffered from. Me personally, driving a nice car down the street in my hometown of Pomona and getting pulled over and never being told what I'm being pulled over for, and then being asked if I got grenades and rocket launchers literally in my car.
Rocket,
you know what I'm saying?
That's
like a bazooka, like asked if I had a bazooka in the car. You know what I'm saying? So the system is what's problematic.
Yeah.
Right. And ultimately, you know, now that we live in this age where information is instant, you know, where something pop off out my window right now, I can turn on my phone, go live, and the world is seeing it immediately. You know what I mean? Like, there's no longer any speculation. You know what I mean? I don't know what the time gap was for the Rodney King thing, but you think about Ahmaud Arbery. You know what I mean? That happened back in February. We just now finding out about it. So it's like one of those things to where information is traveling instantly. I'm hoping that people get a chance to understand what the motive that we're fighting for is. That it's bigger than just, you know, it's bigger than just what's being told to you. That this is a systemic thing that has existed for a very long time, that has been dismissed because certain language has been brought up. When you start talking about slavery, immediately people dismiss it. Oh, that happened so long ago. But you as a white person haven't dealt with the same things that we as Black people have dealt with when it comes to the oppression of a lot of these systemic issues that are occurring. And now you're seeing it all boil over because it has existed for so long in several different places. And here we are. What was you gonna say, Swift?
I was gonna say, even let's think unrealistically for a second. Even if you take the slavery portion out of the equation, just look at it from the simple fact of the oppression of a certain class of people, whether it's color, economic, you know, background or what have you. Like, just the simple fact that there is a level of oppression that's targeted at certain groups. From a humanities standpoint, you know, can we not make that right? Is that too much to ask? And I think that's what, you know, I'm hoping, like, you know, with all these freaking riots and looting, like, you know, some of these people are like, or more of these people are realizing, like, yeah, we have to deal with this because it's not right from a humanity standpoint. And one thing, like, I want to make sure, like, people understand coming from me, that, you know, we see, you know, reporters out on the street and they're interviewing, you know, people, like, during, you know, the looting and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, there's been some articulate people out there who've, like, brought up great points. But for me, I think the most important thing that everybody should be saying is, the main thing we are asking for is to hold these people accountable.
That's it.
That's it. Like in its simplest form, hold them accountable. At bare minimum, if a cop takes a life of an individual who is unarmed, he should do 10 years minimum. Now, if it's like excessive force, then we can go up to like, 15, 25 life, whatever the case. But there has to be accountability, because when there is no accountability, you see this over and over and over. When the freaking baboon in the White House isn't being held accountable, he does more and more, because he's like, well, I pushed the line this far. They didn't hold me accountable, so now I'm going to push it this far.
Yeah.
Didn't hold me accountable. Now I'm going to push it this far. Like,
but that's natural. I mean, you see it with kids.
Yes.
If you want to break it all the way down.
If you're a parent, you get it.
I mean, if you just knowing the behavior, just simple human behavior, people will push the line and cross it whenever they can. Period.
Right.
Period. I was watching something the other day about a study that Harvard did, right? And it was crazy. Harvard did this study on empathy, and they found out that 80% of people lack empathy, any kind of empathy whatsoever. They're not sociopaths. They just don't get empathy. They can't understand walking a mile in someone else's shoes. It just does not register for them. So we are fighting this fight, hoping that 20% of the people who are not people of color actually get it, because the other 80% is a lost cause.
Right.
Like that's basically what it comes down to. And knowing that, and then not holding people accountable on top of it, just compounds the issue that much more, because now people are desensitized to it, because, oh, if the cop's not held accountable, then, well, it must not have been that bad. Then the excuses roll in. Then it's, oh, well, I'm sure they did something to deserve it. Oh, well, they shouldn't have run. And then you get that snowball effect of, oh, well, they should have complied. They should have this, they should have that. And then when all of those parameters have been met, compliance happened, respect happened, they followed all of the orders that were given to them by the cops, and they still got shot or suffocated or whatever, then that's when the cognitive dissonance comes in. Oh, well, I'm sure they did something. They were probably just a bad person and they deserve to die. And so again, we flash back to the protests, and I'm not condoning like the looting and the rioting and whatnot, even when done by people of color, because that's the only language that these people seem to understand.
Yeah.
Because at this point, when you hear all these people talking about, oh, well, the looting and the rioting and the stealing and why do they have to do this? Well, because you people hold merchandise and capitalism and the almighty dollar above Black bodies. So now you want to continue to you've been looting Black bodies for years.
Decades, centuries.
So now when we loot your stuff, that's a language that you obviously understand. Maybe you can.
And I'm glad that we are adding context to this, because it, again, like coming into it, like my brain was everywhere, I think, as we mentioned. So I'm glad that we are adding context. And you said something that was very important. When you have a lack of accountability, there is a high risk of people losing hope, which is what we're seeing.
Yeah.
People don't have, and I mean, and by people, I made intentions during the new moon, and it's to eliminate toxic language. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to stop cursing. It's going to be very specific and precise in the things that I say, right? So eliminating they and being vague and being very specific, right? When Black people, when you refer to Black people, you're referring to particular communities that haven't had hope in the justice system, in politics, in a lot of those things, right? And a lot of it is a lack of information, or information that has been distorted, especially when you think about, when we talk about voting and getting out to vote. Like, the presidential, that, we know that that's rigged and all of that, but then voting on the local level where things actually matter. And again, going back to holding not only the officers, but your DA, the mayor, your local officials, holding them accountable for a lot of those things. And I think that's why, him being arrested came so fast, is because they were holding, the mayor even stepped up and was like, look, he needs to get, charged, and there needs to be, he needs to go through the process, et cetera, because he knew, hey, I'm in this position of office because of the people.
But not only that, anybody would go through the process, meaning you'd get arrested, you would be charged, you would go to trial, and then if you get convicted and get sentenced based on, which I want to touch on that too, but then you have, again, going back to Black people, there's a lack of trust and faith within the system, because we've seen it so many times, and again, going back to Tiana's point, that's what you're seeing, the overflow of that is the frustration that's coming back. And it's like, all right, well, look, we tried talking to y'all. We tried posting things when this happened with, when ultimately Trayvon Martin is our version of Emmett Till, with kind of firing off this new wave of civil protest and civil rights, and asking for our humanity, as Swivel said, to be, acknowledged in a sense. You're not listening to that. Pac said it best. He was like, look, we've been knocking and saying, hey, we hungry, can you let us in? After a while, we gonna kick in the door and start ripping everything up, right? And that's what you're seeing. What I'm hoping, though, with this protest, is that individuals understand that, to Tiana's point, hurting them in the pockets, it's a matter, it doesn't serve you any justice if you go out and you protest and you burn down a Target, which we saw, right? But then once all of this is over and tensions, kind of settle down, and you go right back and you start shopping at these very corporations and institutions that have money invested inside of private prisons and school to prison pipelines and things of that nature.
Talking about that Target real quick, just to interject, I saw a report that apparently, and I've only seen just one thing about this. So do your research, but it was reported, I guess, that particular Target was funding or helping to fund the police department.
I also heard that, I don't know if you're going to say it, but I also heard that particular Target was refusing to sell certain supplies to the Black community. I can't remember if it was solely because of, COVID, or like if once people started kind of becoming vocally upset, and right before looting happened, then Target was like, nope, we don't want your business.
But they had issues with individuals and management in that particular Target for, a while prior. Plus, that added to the fact that they were funding the police department, I guess, a significant amount of because all Targets donate to something. Some of them donate to schools and whatnot. And so that one was a direct, a donation to the police department.
Which my speculation is just a clean way to launder your money. You know what I mean? It's basically you washing something. You feel me? And again, that's speculation. That's not based on any tangible evidence or anything, but understanding how a lot of, the corruption exists, how much corruption exists within that level of corporate behavior. I wouldn't doubt it. It makes sense. And I think a lot of those businesses and corporations that, have been silent and have been a part of the problem, even if they've been complicit or been neutral, you starting to see it. You know what I mean? You starting to see them get damaged. Now, I don't condone a lot of the ignorance of people breaking in. I know in Los Angeles this weekend, we saw, dispensaries get broken into and other businesses that are just sensitive. Why are you breaking into a Mercedes-Benz You know what I'm saying? Like, I get it. If it's the same concept of they've been putting money into the police, like, I get it. But then at the same token, like, y'all not getting anything done by breaking into any of these stores and stealing. Like, I saw somebody steal like a Honda crossover. Like, they gonna track that down. Like, there's a VIN number. Like, that's not, you not doing anything with that. If anything, it's find out the paper trail. You know what I'm saying? Find out where Honda is sending their money. You know what I mean? Are they actually, profiting off of private prisons, or, are they benefiting off of, are they putting money into this systemic oppression? Then you go about it that way.
They're just going off of emotion and just smashing whatever is like right there in sight. But like, I mean, knocking off sneaker stores just so you can have a come up on some sneakers, or it's like, it's what's the point? But again, that kind of goes back to like, well, it's not us per se as far as Black people that are starting it. Like, Questlove posted like he's seen well over 20 clips, and I've seen several. I've seen 8 or more myself of white boys in broad daylight lighting things on fire and dropping them off through windows. Like, and whether you want to go to down that rabbit hole of like those things are being done perpetually to spark these riots and looting and that kind of thing, or if it's just one of those like those guys are trying to like vent their frustration, that's how they know how to do it, and then once they've set something ablaze or smashed in a door, then like other Black people who weren't really ready to like go to that level, but they just take advantage of the situation.
Right.
It's like that mob mentality.
But I mean, again,
either way, it speaks to privilege. And shout out to Tiffany Hobbs. We had her on the show. She started the record company One-on-One Records and everything. We had her on the show. She's probably the biggest activist and unapologetic individual that I know. Went down to Fairfax, this weekend for the protests, and eventually the police presence, showed up and started to basically shut everything down. She sat in her car and she, posted on her story on Instagram her thoughts and what she saw, because she just started to observe. And long story short, she noticed that out of maybe 300 people, there was only about 10 people that were Black, right? And while she was literally filming her story, she saw somebody hop out of their car, write graffiti, a white person hop out of their car, vandalize a bus, and then jump back in their car, right? Yeah. Some of the same clips that you probably saw, that I've been seeing and posting have been of white people throwing things from yards away, you know what I mean? They'll throw something at the police, and then that affects the Black protesters that are on the front line just trying to be peaceful. You know what I mean? And ultimately or even white people vandalizing and putting Black Lives Matter on a building, and Black women saying like, look, don't do that, because we gonna catch flat for that. Yep. You know what I mean? Like, y'all not doing any justice or service to, I get that y'all frustrated, but again, what are we out here doing? You know what I mean? If you do decide to go out there and protest, understand what you're doing. And again, don't go out there and protest if you're just gonna turn around and still shop at Target, shop at, at people that are benefiting off of the oppression of Black people or not supporting Black people. You know what I mean? Like, it ain't doing no.
How many of those people are doing it because they are truly upset and frustrated at the system? Or how many of them are plants? Yeah, there in order to discredit the message that the Black and brown community is trying to send. Like, and that's where, like, again, accountability needs to happen. Yeah. And I love the fact that that snitch ass cop, his wife, like, the day, I think the day before he got arrested, she filed for a divorce. And I love
the day before.
The day he got arrested.
It was either the day he got arrested or the day before.
After. Well,
here's where I have a problem with it. And again, this is a very I don't know all the details clearly. I don't know this woman, but from face value, I'm very skeptical about her actions because, again, this isn't his first rodeo, right? You were still married to him back when all the rest of that BS was happening. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And again, from face value, seeing how protesters showed up at your front door, you know what I mean? And you had to have an army of police officers protecting and helping you barricade your house because they found out where you live and they pulled up on you. You know what I mean? So now it's real for you because it's your livelihood is now in danger. Your family is now in danger. So now do you want out because, you know, you seek a refuge now because you affected by it, because now you feel the heat and the pressure, because you know, like, oh, if he doesn't get, despite how much time he gets, I think at this point, and I'm speaking for myself, people want blood.
Yeah.
Like there needs to be a casualty in this civil war that we dealing with, right? Like that officer needs to die. The officers, like, and I'm saying that out of frustration and emotion, right? Like George Zimmerman, he needs his life taken. Like he needs to die. Like there ain't no put him in jail. Like we seen them get off. We seen them have reduced sentences. Like somebody gotta die, bro. Like somebody needs to bleed and die from this. Like we don't want to see anybody go to jail or go into a system that's ultimately protecting you, right? Yeah, so you being a wife,
they'll put him in jail, and like I've seen people say, well, like when he goes to jail, you know, he needs to be put with the general population, who will then do. But he won't see general pop because
he's a part of the fraternity.
Have all the protection, you know. He's gonna what? Like
you're gonna be in Camp Snoopy, where you're gonna have all of the privileges that you're gonna have all the privileges that somebody that's in jail right now for a marijuana charge doesn't have. Yeah. With marijuana now being legal, you know what I mean? Like you gonna have more rights in prison, in jail, or wherever you're going. You know what I'm saying? That a common person that doesn't have any, you know, any malicious act, you know, somebody that hasn't committed a murder, you know what I mean, that's in there on a third strike, you know, that may have a felony off of something, like whatever the case may be, it doesn't matter. They didn't kill somebody. You know what I mean? You're going to be protected from it. You know what I'm saying? And so again, this goes back to, you know, I want to make sure that we still zero in on the context of the overall point of what's happening, right? That's part of the system. You know what I'm saying? Like you being protected.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like let's make this equal. Let's make this an equal, you know, playing field. If he's gonna get special treatment, then give that to the black dude. You know what I mean? Like, and I think this is where, you know, black people don't want to hear anything. And why I said what I said when we first started is because we seen white people kill nine black people in church. We seen you do mass murder and then you get royal treatment, you get a bulletproof vest and get treated somewhere else. Meanwhile, somebody that gets accused of having a fake $20 bill, or right, for initially they said it was a fake check. If that's the case, like you could track that down. Like you could track that down. You know what I'm saying? But it's a fake 20. It's like, all right, cool. It's a fake 20. He deserved to die because of that. Let's keep the playing field even. You gonna kill somebody for a fake 20, kill the white ones too.
They drove a white boy who killed a bunch of people. They drove him to McDonald's because he said he was hungry.
I'm saying.
The nine in the church. Yeah.
Yeah, and like,
I'm saying.
You know, I mean, I remember, I believe it was like in the 90s when I was a kid, like a black man getting charged for an obscene amount of years because he drove the car, the getaway car, in, I think it was like a robbery of some kind, and somebody was killed. Like, but he was the driver. He had nothing to do with the shooting or anything like that. He was just the driver. Yeah. But he got an obscene amount.
Became an accessory to murder.
Accomplice.
So can we talk about the charges real quick with this guy?
Yeah.
This cop?
Yeah. So I know that a lot of people were looking for. So, and I think that's something that I know that I want to receive more information about and be educated more about it. And I think in the upcoming weeks for the show, we should bring somebody that can articulate a lot of the law, the law aspects a little bit better than just us kind of speculating and going off, right? So I understand that in the past, a lot of the officers have been charged with like first-degree murder, right? And we've seen them get off because according to the law, first-degree murder is something that's premeditated. So again, in my uneducated, mind, it's literally somebody sitting, hypothetically, I'm sitting in my room, I'm thinking about inflicting harm or trying to kill a person or a group of people, coming up with the plan and then going to execute that plan. Yes. That would be considered first degree. I think second degree is clearly kind of like somebody dies, but it's kind of, it's different, right? Third degree, which I believe...
But you may not have premeditated it.
You haven't premeditated it.
Yeah.
Third degree is what this officer was charged with, whereas again, it wasn't premeditated. It wasn't intentional, but it was like somebody died, due to some action that you took, right? Yeah. Here's where it starts to get convoluted because of the simple fact that there was an autopsy that came out that apparently shows that Brother Lloyd didn't die from asphyxiation or suffocation, right? So if in the court, the defending lawyer can try to play an angle to say, well, he didn't die from the inflictions that, the officer put on him. But
the family is actually contesting.
They're doing the second.
And
right.
They're going to get an independent autopsy done.
And here's the thing, like let's say that this first autopsy hypothetically was correct, right? And this is me just trying to be neutral in the situation, right? To try to get down to the facts, right? Let's say that he didn't die from asphyxiation, and apparently it said that he had a pre-existing condition or whatever the case may be. The fact still remains that he died in your custody. He was being detained and he died under some actions that you provided. And I think with the charges that are up against him, I read I don't know if it's considered an affidavit or a complaint. I don't know what it's actually called, but somebody wrote it up and actually spelled out the charges and what was happening and exactly, detailed the interaction between the officer and George Floyd, right? And
murder and manslaughter, correct?
And manslaughter, yeah. And I think with that, and I think the maximum is 25 years, yeah. Right? I believe
for murder 3, the max is 25 years, and then
it's 10 years for manslaughter.
10 years for manslaughter, right? So I'm thinking that he's definitely going to be convicted of at least that, because according to how it was spelled out, he didn't comply with the protocol that the policing ultimately enforces. Like, you're supposed to go through a certain protocol of if somebody is saying that they can't breathe or whatever the case may be, which I personally feel like he, according to information that's being presented, he ultimately had like an anxiety attack, because they were saying that they were trying to get him to get into the car, and he mentioned that he was claustrophobic, right? And then like his body basically was freezing up and he fell, which I think led to him being on the ground, which there's also video of them punching him inside of the squad car as well. So I don't know the order, the chronological order of these events happening, but whatever the case may be, you did not offer a service to somebody that clearly was in distress, despite whether or not, you thinking that he can breathe because he's talking or whatever the case may be. Like, he's in distress and you didn't comply with that. Ultimately, him dying, you're now responsible for this man's death.
What I want people to understand, because I've seen a lot of outrage online about how come he didn't get murder 1, he deserves murder 1. And as much as we feel like, yeah, he deserves as I would not be mad to see him go to like a gas chamber. Period.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I'm not.
No, I don't want that. I don't want him to go to a gas chamber. I want him to get killed in general population. Like I want him to get strangled and thrown over the top. You know what I'm saying? The top tier. Like I want him to die a horrible death.
As much as I would like to see like the ultimate punishment for him for what he did to this man, people need to understand that, like you mentioned, overcharging him will result in him getting off. We've seen it time and time and time again when we're like, yeah, charge this cop, blah, blah, blah. And I want to say, what was it? Mike Brown? They charged the cop with murder one.
Murder one,
they couldn't meet the burden of proof for murder one, so he got off.
Because it didn't come off as premeditated.
Exactly. And if you can't meet the burden of proof for that, they will get off. Even if they get indicted, we can celebrate all day. But the indictment is not the hard part. In all honesty, a lot of people have heard the phrase, like, you can indict a ham sandwich. It's not hard to get for a lawyer to get an indictment. That happens all day long. It's the actual conviction. So to have a cop convicted of first-degree murder is what the problem is. So it's actually better that they didn't charge him with murder one. So, and a lot of people are in an uproar and pissed off about that, but it's more likely that he will actually see jail time and be convicted of something with a murder 3 and a manslaughter charge than it is if they charged him with murder 1.
And in my, boss, I'm like you, in my layman's understanding of murder 1, 2, 3, from what I understand, murder 1, there's no way we can go with murder 1. Like we don't stand a chance of getting a conviction because there's no premeditation in that situation. Like, I mean, you can make the small argument of it only because they came out, they worked together as security guards at a local nightclub, but at the same time, the owner of the nightclub said like, oh yeah, they both worked. Both were employed. But she did also stipulate that George Floyd worked indoors and the cops worked outside. So that part will get tossed out easy because it'll be easy for the defense attorney to be like, look, they never really interacted with each other at work. So there was no opportunity for this snitch cop to create animosity towards Floyd or even knew who he was when they were trying to arrest him. So I think that part can get wiped out real easy. So murder 2 is the highest we would be able to push for. But again, like
and
if
murder 2 says you meant to kill somebody. Yeah,
you meant to kill him. Now, for me, the body language said you meant to kill him on the spot. But we can't prove that because we can't prove what was going on inside his mind. But
short of saying I'm going to kill him.
Right. I mean, and Foz, going back to your point a minute ago, like you guys are police officers, you guys are first responders. So when somebody is saying, I can't do this, I can't breathe, I can't move, there's a lot of information that's being blurted out in that moment where the cops then have an obligation to say, he can't breathe, let me render aid. Or he's saying, I can't move. You have 3 officers kneeling on that man. You know if he's resisting or not. Yeah. Because when he's lying there saying he can't move, 1, and then 2, physically not really putting up a fight.
And then handcuffed
on top of it. Like, and
here's my thing. And then you also talked about him resisting when the video came out from the shop owner showing that he was complying with everything. Even if, again, him being claustrophobic, or let's say hypothetically he started to resist, it didn't take 3 of you to kneel on him that way, especially when you have other means of detaining a person. When you have a stun gun or you have rubber bullets, you know what I mean? And again, the man is handcuffed, right? So, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, like.
No, like I agree. And like Tiana said, even if you're kneeling on the man and like maybe initially when he goes to the ground, like there is, a feeling of resistance or a smidgen of actual resistance, when you're kneeling on him for close to 10 minutes, at some point he's no longer resisting. And that was probably around the 2 or 3 minute mark into you guys kneeling on him. And again, I'll stress the fact that we saw the video when they already were kneeling on him. We don't know how long they were kneeling on him before the young lady started the video.
Yeah.
And so
what were y'all waiting for though? What were they waiting for?
They were waiting for him to die. That's what they were waiting for.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, and I get that, but it's like you're kneeling on him. You're clearly detaining him for purpose. What were you waiting for? Why kneel on him that long? Why not pick him up and put him in the squad car? Are you waiting for backup? Like, you clearly have 4 officers there, right? And I get it. Like, maybe y'all, because the one that was holding everybody at bay, he looked like a bitch, first of all. Like, you look scrawny, like, whatever, right? So if y'all didn't have the manpower to pick him up and put him inside of a squad car, are you waiting for more officers? Like, what are you waiting for? What were you waiting for? What was your point? Like, what were you doing?
And I don't, I've only watched the video once, but I was trying to analyze it as much as possible when I watched it, right? And the Filipino or Asian cop who was standing there, kind of keeping the people back, I couldn't hear him clearly, but I swear there was a couple times he made comments that like they thought George Floyd was under some kind of drug influence and was having, a like overdose type of reaction, and that's why they were restraining him on the ground. But again, even if that's the case, even if we were to believe that, it doesn't justify the fact that you knelt on him. 3 guys knelt on him for close to 10 minutes, because when, again, the last 2 to 3 minutes of the video, you can see George is physically spent. He can no longer move. His breathing drastically slows down. At that point, 2 things should have happened. Like you said, 3 guys should be able to physically pick you up and then put you in the car. But before that, he was screaming out, "I can't breathe." So when he stops moving, that's when you should say, maybe we should turn him over, allow this man to get some oxygen, because we are not supposed to take a life. 1, we're supposed to protect and serve. 2, we're first responders. We should render aid if necessary. 3, 4, you've got however many civilians out there yelling out, "Check his pulse. He can't breathe. He's not moving. Get off him. He's not moving. You can get off him now."
Now, and then this is where, like, it for me, it's kind of like, does this fall under a gray area for when it goes back to the law, right? When you talk about 1st, 2nd, and 3rd degree, at that point, when you become aware that you are inflicting harm or somebody's life is ultimately leaving them, does that, and you still proceed with your actions, right? Does that then now constitute it being a higher charge? You know what I mean? Like, again, I don't know, but it's one of those things that it's like, that's where my mind is going. It's like, clearly there has to be some, I know that the law is almost designed for individuals in these type of cases to be able to be free, because it's it's all left up to interpretation, and ultimately it's whatever way that a jury can be swayed when it comes to the arguments, right? But it's like, again, like I'm thinking, like when you see that somebody and it's clear, like Steven Jackson made a good point. He was like, look, man, like when you have somebody, and this is Black people understanding Black people, when a nigga is calling out for his mama,
yeah,
and apparently his mom had passed away. You know what I'm saying? Like when you calling out for your mama and you yelling out, please, like, bruh, like you desperate at that point. You know what I'm saying? Like there's subtle nuances to Black culture, and that's one of them. Like when you start screaming out for help and you screaming for your mother, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, to go to your point a minute ago, like you can, from what I understand, you can up the level of charges. So, you know, if they wanted to bump it up to a murder 2, it's something that can be done. And for me, again, in kind of analyzing the situation, watching the paramedics arrive, take the man's pulse while that snitch ass cop still had his knee on his neck, and then the way they just kind of disrespectfully rolled him over and dragged him onto the stretcher. Like, you know, that it can't, supposedly it's reported that George Floyd later died at the hospital, right? But if that's the case, he would have had somewhat of a pulse. It probably would have been faint. On the spot, you're the paramedics. When you rolled him over and those freaking bitch ass cops finally got off him, why were you not with the oxygen mask on the spot giving him oxygen? Why, when you put him on a stretcher, was somebody not giving him oxygen? Why, when you put him in the ambulance, do we not see anybody administering any type of aid? It's because, in my opinion, he was already gone. And at that point, based off of that scenario alone, I can see how a prosecution can up the ante to a murder 2, because you deliberately took this man's life. It wasn't premeditated ahead of time, but in the heat of the moment, you got to a point where you were like, you know what? I'm going to keep going. Mm-hmm. I'm going to keep pressing, and I'm going to shift my knee, because when George Floyd kind of turns and to try to get some more oxygen, I'm going to reposition myself to cut that supply off. And like you said, when he's screaming please and for his mother, that should be an indication like we've gone too far. But it isn't, and that's why we see the level of rage and frustration spilling over, not just in Minneapolis where it happened, but in at least 22, I think I heard even 30 different cities across the country.
Yeah.
And people
everywhere
why is this happening? Look, and
just open your eyes.
Just open your eye. And going back to my earlier point, like, you know, we shouldn't show the full length of this man's execution.
Yeah.
But for people who are not black and brown to understand, they should see the entire thing and feel what 9 minutes and 40 seconds plus feels like of a man pleading. Like, you know, it's a lion freaking with his jaws around a zebra's neck. It's a boa constrictor who will wrap itself around its prey and squeeze, and every time you exhale, your stomach gets smaller so they can squeeze even tighter. It's a slow, agonizing fucking process. And that's why I agree with Tiana, like, that man should see the gas chamber. He should feel a slow, agonizing, suffocating process and understand what that feels like. Because that's justice.
And was really
a century, but
it hasn't.
Well, in Minnesota, apparently it was eliminated in 1911.
Oh.
But what's crazy is that time and time again we've seen these type of officers claim that they fear for their life. You know what I'm saying? And it's I'm just wondering, and this has been like my biggest agenda with all of this, with all of the anger and everything. And again, like I've been fighting the urge to like, I've been afraid to go outside. Like, in the area that I work at, when it comes to the restaurant, it's populated by a lot of white people, right? And during my lunch break, like, I've been just exhausted just from working both jobs, right? And on my lunch break, I'll go sit in my car and just I can't even rest. Like, I can't even take a little quick nap or anything. And as I'm watching people walk by, I check myself, because it's like, okay, they're not immediately responsible, but then their ignorance to what's happening, you know what I'm saying, enrages me, you know what I'm saying, and the privilege that they exist in, you know what I mean, and just interactions that I've had while being in that area just kind of light me up, right? And it's hard for me to, I'm really fighting not to just to be triggered, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm hoping that no one gives me a reason.
Yeah.
is where I stand, right? And with that, trying to channel all of that energy into an agenda to help bring awareness and help people to understand, you know, everything that's going on as far as it being systemic. I'm really wondering if there's a way, or want to try to put something in place to where we're fighting these types of instances with changing laws and changing definitions of murder 1, murder 2, and murder 3 when it comes to subtle nuances, right? And people fearing for their life. Like, one of the things that I appreciate, which clearly we saw, and I mean, clearly this is an outburst because we've seen 3-4 incidences in the past, what is it, like 2 weeks in a sense, with please forgive me for forgetting the young lady's name. I believe it was Breonna. I forget her last name. Breonna Taylor, was it? Right? Saw Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. We saw the man that was in the park. You know, we saw Ahmaud Arbery, and then we saw the young man that was in the park.
Last name.
Cooper was his last name, which ironically was the last name of the white lady that called the cops on him, right? We saw that happen, as well as a countless amount of other incidences where I saw a video of a young lady that pushed her autistic child into a lake and killed her child, like attempted it once, was unsuccessful, then did it again and successfully killed her child in a canal or something, and blamed it on black people. Said that black people killed her. And we're still seeing it, like white people getting beat up and knocked out and packed out, and then claiming that it was black people. I just saw a white dude say, you know, he got his head busted in Salt Lake City and said, oh, you know, yeah, they beat me. I got beat up by 2 African Americans because I yelled out "All Lives Matter" out my window. But then the video surfaces of several people showing like, no, you was outside of your car with crossbows, bruh, pointing it at people. You know what I'm saying? And then you got packed out, not by black people, but by white people.
Not by blacks.
Not by blacks. You got packed out by your own. You know what I'm saying? So we're seeing this, and everything is flaring up, right? And I say all that to say I'm happy to see that New York, I believe, is trying to bring criminal charges against old girl for calling the police, because ultimately, you know, it was an act of terrorism. You know what I mean? And this is where the conversation really needs to be had with instances like this, and where laws and definitions of criminal activity needs to be readjusted and redefined, because I've had police called on me before, right? And I understand police are doing their job. I understand that they're showing up to do a job, right? And if they're only getting one aspect, like if you call the police, that white lady called the police, I'm fearing for my life, blah, 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 like you crying and making it seem like you're distressed and your life is being threatened in the language that you're using, the dispatcher is going to relay that message that she's receiving to an officer. So now an officer is showing up to a scene expecting to see someone threatening somebody's life, and he is unaware of whether or not you have a weapon. He doesn't know, whatever the case may be, he doesn't know. All he knows is that someone is in distress. At what point do we fight the system in a sense of changing, you know, what it means to you know, to be a terrorist? You know what I'm saying? Where do we change, you know, again, this first degree, second degree, second degree, third degree? How do we change that to where people that are participating, like this officer, whether, you know, he tried it or not, or tries to use this excuse of he might have felt like his life was in danger, or he feared for his life, when clearly that wasn't the case. You know what I mean? When lying was clearly, you know, evident, when it comes to you talking about him resisting arrest when he wasn't. How do we change that? Is there a way to change that?
I believe there is a way to change it. It definitely comes with legislation and getting politicians to we hear the black community, we got to come up with a black agenda and get politicians on board and that kind of thing. I wouldn't necessarily say we need a black agenda. At this point, we need a freaking human rights agenda that is equal across all ethnicities and all playing fields. But it's that's gonna take some time as far as kind of getting the right politicians and whatever to rework the verbiage on a lot of these laws. And I agree with you 1,000%. It has to happen. I obviously understand that that's going to be a long, drawn-out process. To get legislation proposed and then voted on, and But going to, or go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, on this whole line of just generating change, Sean King, who I feel like a lot of times he doesn't get the respect he deserves. He's launched something called Real Justice.
Yeah.
And his whole initiative and everything that he's doing is all about getting behind and getting funding behind DAs that have pledged to say that they are going to hold police accountable. That's his whole initiative. And it's across the board, it's nationwide. They look for specific DAs that are running, because obviously DAs are elected officials. If we want to hold cops accountable, we need to elect the right people. And it goes all the way back to your point, Foz, about actually participating in your local elections, because that's what makes the difference. Not the presidential election doesn't affect us as much as the local ones do. Right. So his whole initiative, like I said, it's called Real Justice. They have created a super PAC, so it's the Real Justice PAC, that donates all of this money and stands behind DAs that have taken a specific pledge to them that say that they will absolutely hold police accountable in situations exactly like this.
And maybe in terms of holding police accountable, maybe what needs to happen is some of the verbiage in the laws need to be written in two different ways, one that applies to just regular citizens and one that applies to law enforcement, because we see that based the way it's written, it's much easier for law enforcement to either be acquitted or get a drastically reduced sentence, in the Botham case, or not even get indicted. And that's where we are, as a community, are all freaking screaming at people to understand, look, we're demanding at this point accountability.
Yeah.
And it's up to,
it's the word of the day.
It's up to the powers that be to find a way to make accountability happen. And I guarantee you start holding cops in particular accountable, things will change for the better.
Yeah.
And they had a former DC police chief on CNN the other night, and he was saying I believe all 4 officers should be arrested and charged. There should be convictions, but that's not going to solve the problem. We have a bigger systemic problem. And my immediate reaction was no, that will work to solve the problem, because the moment you hold one officer accountable, it sets precedent. And then statistically speaking, this is going to happen again. So when the next situation happens, then, there's more accountability that happens. And then after a while, officers see that trend and then they start to think, you know what, I don't want to lose my job and end up, doing 10, 20, 25 or more in prison, based off of a quote unquote potential knee-jerk reaction. You know what I'm saying?
But they should be held at a higher standard in general.
Because you're a public servant.
Well, but here's the thing, though. I think a lot of it also, it comes down to, I think, like I said, accountability is the word of the day. But there's so much more that needs to be done.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, I liked this point. Think about how long it takes for someone to become a lawyer. It takes you years and years of schooling to understand the letter of the law enough to be able to argue it in court. The police academy is 8 freaking weeks.
But schooling and all that, I agree with you, but that's not going to change racism.
To understand the laws and enforce them. But you need years and years and years of schooling to understand the law so that you can argue it in court. 8 weeks to enforce it. There's a lot that needs to be done just in the academy itself. Like, I'm sorry, you shouldn't be able to be a high school dropout and join the academy and be physically fit for that 8 weeks of your life, and then you've got a job for life with a pension and retirement benefits and all that other stuff, and you're just unleashed with a badge and a gun to enforce a law that you barely understand. That little
Somebody presented that. I think Sean King presented that settlements in cases like this should come out of their retirement and pension and things to start changing. I personally feel that the old Black Panther Party, we need to revive that. You know what I mean? And it's and I'm actively working to join a Black-owned gun association, to get a licensed firearm, but then also on a bigger sense of unifying with different chapters that not only provide services for our communities when we talk about healthcare and all of that, but then also protecting our community when we have situations like this. Because when this was happening with the Black Panthers, part of the reason why California ain't no open carry anymore is because the Black Panthers were showing up when there was police activity.
Yep.
Not to incite nothing, but to make sure, like, all right, we gonna make sure y'all do your job. And y'all start barking, we start bucking. We got the same artillery you got. You know what I'm saying? And have it be that way. And again, I mean, we're not ready for that. And I know that it's a slow process, but to a point that you made, I think with exposing certain officers, I watched the documentary Making a Murderer, right? Which I didn't watch the second season. I haven't watched the second season yet, and don't even know how I feel about it anymore. But it was crazy how they talked about a lot of the corruption that existed within that police force that was wrapped around that whole case, right? And how it started going up to even like the federal level, and how the federal level wasn't even, intervening in the case and all of that. And what it exposed, it was like a little short clip where they mentioned that exposing, that little corruption would literally take it all the way up to the top. And it would literally kind of open up Pandora's box to all the corruption on many different levels, and how many different people are getting paid, and just all the corruption. And I feel as though that's part of some of the protection that we're seeing with a lot of this. You know what I'm saying? And again, it goes back to my opening point. Like, yeah, it takes 8 weeks because the police aren't there to wrangle a specific group of people as far as when it comes to the system of policing. You know what I mean? Again, there's good officers that go in and they want to protect and serve their communities. But again, it's like the system that you're in doesn't provide the opportunity to fully do that. Because again, if you are a good officer, I've heard stories of partners that I have that's on the force. It's like, yo, if you're a good officer and you start exposing certain things and you take that up to the higher ups, you get blackballed in a sense to where you won't have a partner, or you get sent out on certain missions where you basically get set up and you call for some backup, ain't nobody showing up, or they gonna drag their feet to get there. You know what I'm saying? And so it becomes like, a lot of that, you know what I'm saying? And I think those types of situations ultimately come to light, and then it turns into something different, which is ultimately what I'm seeing is happening, to where we're starting to get into this Judge Dredd, apocalyptic type of, militarization of policing and anarchy. You know what I mean? That's what it's appearing to be. You know what I'm saying? I don't think we're fully there yet, but when you start seeing National Guards come in and they start busting, paintballs at people for not being inside the house, being on their front porch and all of that, like, where are we at in life right now? Like, what are we doing? How do we get to this point? And then what is the next step to where you incite riots, you lose respect for police force, you don't have any trust or faith, you know what I'm saying? And you're not abiding by their authority. Then you take it up an extra level to where, you bringing in the military, they're not abiding by no state laws. Like, they don't care about no state laws. They'll bust at you and don't, like, whatever. Like, you gone now, that's it. You know what I'm saying? And they're not gonna reap no repercussions and none of that, because it's like, we don't abide by the same laws and all of that. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's also important for us to understand, like, is there a trap, or what is the other agenda that's existing amongst all of this as well? So then, we aren't being exposed to something that we're not ready for. Well, you know what I'm saying, when it comes to.
But the police, and a lot of people need to understand, to your point, police are not really here to protect and serve us.
Right.
They're here to keep us in order and protect and serve those at the top. Right. Like, that's what it comes down to. They are there as enforcers and peacekeepers, per se, for people who are way above our pay grade. And that's what it comes down to. They protect and serve them. They just keep us in check.
Right.
What's interesting is I, saw somebody post like, look, some of these certain situations, these officers have no problem as far as, taking somebody's life, because they view our lives as vacation trips and jet skis, because they're getting paid overtime pay to be at a crime scene because they took somebody's life and they have to, investigate and this, that, the third. Like, and so there's apparently been cops that have blatantly, said, like, this is how we view certain people's lives. And it's like, okay, one, where's the freaking humanity in that? Two, like, if they're being vocal like that, why is it not their fellow officers or their superiors or both, like, holding these snitches accountable, or holding them to a higher level, or reprimanding them if you're freaking whatever that jackass cop's name, who has at least 12, I've heard upwards of 18 complaints against him. Like,
because that's police culture.
And well, I get it, but again, like, it's me kind of verbalizing this stuff so, like, viewers and listeners, like, can process it if they haven't taken the time to think about it. But I love the fact that the University of Minnesota has cut all their financial ties with the police department, because look, we're no longer going to hire you and give you guys money to run security when we have events and concerts and what have you, because you clearly can't.
The problem.
You clearly can't freaking conduct yourselves in the right way. So we'll go somewhere else. So that's hitting, that police department in the pocketbook. Shout out Brother Reza, who's like, look, when things like this happen, you need to sue the police department, and more importantly, sue the insurance company that insures that police department, because you're hitting them in the pocketbook. And that's when they start, they step back and be like, maybe we should go about a different course of action before we take somebody's life again unjustifiably.
Here's where also, because I appreciate certain actions, right, that have taken place when it comes to, like, universities, no longer hiring officers, right? Here's the problem that I have with it. Again, all smoke. This ain't the first time that nothing like this has happened. And y'all still hired them. And this is around the world. And you know, my homeboy, you know, my brother who I mentioned earlier, who has 3 generations of you know, family members in the force, he had posted something that Nike put out, right? And then, like, you know, as we were talking last night, he was like, you know, yo, like, I had to bite that, you know, because I kind of, you know, I jumped out the window to kind of repost that. And it's like really just good PR work, you know what I mean? With companies and corporations like Nike and Reebok, and a lot of these institutions that are billionaires that we've put money behind, us meaning Black culture, that we've put money behind and have made, like Nike, you ain't shit without us at all. Yeah. Adidas, you ain't shit without us. Reebok, you ain't shit without us. Like, we made y'all that.
Yeah, I think we,
you know what I'm saying? Like, y'all weren't
the company except for like New Balance.
You know what I'm saying? But I mean, but the thing is like a lot of these incidences, and I mean specifically going back to, you know, the university. This ain't the first time nothing like this has happened. You know what I'm saying? So why now? You know what I'm saying? Are you saving face? Are you trying to avoid, you know, civil unrest on your campus? You know what I'm saying? Like, what is it? What is there something more? And again, they could be very pure in their actions, right? It could be pure. Like, I'm not trying to, out of ignorance, because I don't know. Again, I'm trying to be very conscious of my language. I don't want to just project something out there without having full details and everything. But what I do want to do is present a different perspective and open up those that are watching and listening, open up your minds to also think, because I think there's a culture that's very toxic when it comes to pacifying us in these instances. You know what I mean? Like, what else is there? Let's not just stop because he got arrested. Let's make sure that we follow through. You know what I mean? Let's not just be pacified by, you know, the white woman losing her job. No, let's again change the dynamic so when white people are calling the officers, that there's more of a vetting process that goes through before these officers show up and somebody else ends up dead, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping that with the university situation, you know, when you say, or when you ask why now, I'm hoping it's because somebody there at the top realized, like, hey, 9 minutes and 40 plus seconds of strangulation, like, that's disgusting. And that was the straw that broke this camel's back. I'm hoping that that's what it is. Like you said, you know, this ain't the first time that, you know, police have done something in the city of Minneapolis, but, you know, it may have taken something this grotesque for them to be like, you know what, now we're gonna pull funding because that's just too much. You know, in terms of the freaking Karen in the park, like, yeah, like Tiana said, like, charges should be pressed against her because, again,
you filed a false police report.
That's right. And 2, again, the word of the day, accountability. Like, we saw with Ahmaud Arbery that 2 white men felt they could take justice or whatever, you know, vigilante justice into their own hands and end a man's life with a freaking shotgun at close range. Because why? Because they've been shown repetitively the system is like, they're not going to be held accountable. So they felt they can get away with it. The Karen in the park feels like, I'm going to call because I've seen these situations before where other white people have called the cops and something bad was done to the person they called the cops on. Like, you know, thank the freaking most high above that bird watcher wasn't beaten or worse because of her actions. But still, a precedent needs to be set. Charges filed against her so that other Karens in the world see, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't call the police and ask like I'm freaking losing my life, because it could mean he loses his life. And then I will lose my job and I'll go to jail or whatever.
I feel like they don't learn. They they, white women specifically, and I'm gonna let y'all know, my mama is a white woman. My sister is a white woman.
My mom is a white woman.
I know exactly what the hell I'm talking about. They will weaponize their whiteness, weaponize their womanhood to get what they want in that moment. Consequences be damned. And we've seen it over and over and over again with these women who will call the police because this little black girl is selling water on the streets because it's hot. Fuck your white suburban lemonade stand. Nobody's asking them for a permit. But this little girl, oh, where's your permit? I'm calling the police. Oh, these black people are barbecuing. I'm calling the police. These people, and it's been viral video after viral video for years and years and years. And then the consequences going viral of them losing their jobs, of them losing their livelihoods, all of these things, but they don't learn. And I think that, again, ties back to what I was saying about the Harvard study on empathy. Can't happen to me. I'm above it all. I can't understand what they're going through because I simply lack empathy. And until it happens to me,
it don't hit home.
It doesn't hit home
until it hits home.
Exactly.
And
then that's when you see the influx of white tears. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what I was doing. My actions were just completely reprehensible. Boo-hoo.
And her apology, it's like, what made me upset is it made me think about Emmett Till, right? And this white lie. And again, we've only seen a very small fraction of these incidences being publicized. You know what I'm saying? Ahmaud Arbery is probably multiplied by however many X amount. You know what I mean? And the only reason why we don't know about it is because it wasn't anybody filming, right? So how many black bodies have disappeared in the Deep South because, you know what I mean, of incidences, which is crazy because, you know, all over the nation, you're right. But it's crazy because there was so many other white people that were walking in that same house under construction and didn't get that same treatment as far as we know, right? But Emmett Till, a white woman that lied on a black boy who then ended up losing his life and being beaten and you know, taken away from his family, which if she turns around years later after living a very comfortable life,
of which she,
you know, comes out and said that she lied, it's like, come on, bro. Like, she should be in handcuffs. Did that lady die? She passed away?
I think she's still alive. Did she? I don't know. She may have passed away.
I want to say she may have passed away a couple years because I think that might be why, like, it came out that she was
on her deathbed. And but it goes back. Part of the reason why I brought that up specifically is because let's say something did happen to you know, the brother Cooper. You know what I mean? Birdwatcher Cooper. You know, while he's just out there trying to enjoy some pelicans and seagulls. You know what I'm saying? In Central Park. You know what I mean? Let's say something happened to him. You know what I mean? I don't know what kind of birds is in Central Park. I've never been there. But let's say something did happen to him. You know what I mean? This white woman, again, in her mind, and like to Tiana's point, in their mind, they think, oh, I can utilize this. This is my power to inflict whatever to get my way, knowing that she was in the wrong. You should have had your dog on a fucking leash if the signs is up on the wall, but you think that it's all fine and dandy. You know what I'm saying? But you also in your mind, you can lose your job, but you can get another job, or you can benefit off of hypothetically a trust fund or whatever. But in your mind, you're just like the woman that lied on Emmett Till, and you're going to live a long, prosperous life in the comfort of your whiteness without any type of repercussions or anything. And it would have been a disservice if, you know, Brother Cooper would have lost his mind and beat the fuck out of her. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you can't, you damned if you do, you damned if you don't. Because if he would have beat her up, you know what I'm saying? Understanding like, yo, they about to show up and whoop my ass.
Yeah.
Like, then it becomes a see, I told you so. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So it's like,
he directly, indirectly threatened his life right in front of his face on camera, again, thinking and acting with impunity. I can do it. I can get away with it. But then we'll probably sit there and deny her privilege all day long as if it does not exist.
And it's things like this to where I take joy, and I'm happy to say that I take joy in seeing a lot of these whites getting their ass whooped and beat to a pulp out here in these streets in the middle of these protests. And it's crazy because immediately they'll project, oh, this white business owner was just trying to protect his business from being looted. You know, but then another video follows after that, like, no, he was carrying a sword and was swinging it.
His business.
Did you see the Karen in the wheelchair?
Oh, I was so happy to see her because she could walk too, first of all.
Yeah, oh yeah, she could walk. So,
Yeah,
but for those who haven't seen it, like, or don't know about it, there's a video of her like in the middle of the street crying her eyes out, and she, you know, like got all kinds of dirt. Like she clearly has been in a physical altercation, and she's saying black
fire hydrant dust.
Yeah,
You
know, black people, you know, socked her up or whatever. And they're like, and one of the dudes was like, no, she was sitting in her wheelchair outside of the exit at Target and stabbing black people coming out. So again, like, you know, you brought it on yourself by doing something that you know, felt you had a privilege to do. And it's
I think in that same interview, she mentioned that that the authorities told her to go home. Like, I think the EMT told her to go home. Like, take your ass home. Like, you shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, at this point, again, you either with us or against us, right? Fact remains, if I live on the coast, I got a beachfront property, and I know that there's a tidal wave, I'm in tidal wave range, I'm not gonna stand in front of my house to try to protect it from the tidal wave. Business owners, if you're a business owner, don't try to stand out there in front of the tidal wave that's coming. And I get it. This, if they participate in criminal activity, it doesn't have anything to do. It's taking away. It's almost, again, it's diminishing the purpose of why the protest exists in the first place. So again, that's what I'm against. I mean, shit's gonna burn. It's gonna burn. You know what I mean? And again, I'm not necessarily condoning it, but again, we talked about it, right? If you're a business owner, don't try to protect your business in that way. Get out the way.
Insurance.
You know, I'm saying, like you see a mob of people, you outnumbered. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't try to protect your business by any means. Oh boy, getting out your car with the crossbows. Like, stay in your car. Get out the way. You know what I'm saying? Because trust me, it's not what you want. Like, it's never what you want. You know what I'm saying? Like, in all the years that riots and civil unrest and all of this has taken place, we've seen it time and time. There's video footage of a dude getting stomped out during the Rodney King beat. You know what I mean? During the Rodney King riot. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's never going to benefit you. You know what I'm saying? Stay in your car, stay in your house. Or if you're going to come out, make sure that you are on their side. Otherwise, it's not going to end good for you. You know what I'm saying? But, and part of that is, part of the reason why I brought that up is because you being a business owner trying to protect your business, what that's saying is, I'm against you. I'm against your protest. You know what I'm saying? Your white tears are being exposed. Your white fragility is being exposed. And those that are angry at the system, which your white tears are protected by, you're going to get attacked. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's basically those that are out there doing all of this, they're putting two and two together. And it may not necessarily add up, but it's like, look, you're benefiting from this system. Your property got to burn. Oh, you're going to try to protect it? Well, you're going to get packed out. You trying to come at us? Okay, well, you're going to get this skateboard to your face. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're going to get all these feet, and it's going to be several feet, and all these feet going to hurt. And so I know that it's sad, you know what I mean? And I want to feel for a lot of these people that's getting beat up, but at the end of the day, where are you from? Where are you from?
What side are you on?
What side are you on?
I mean, maybe I should have said this earlier, but you know, in terms of like anybody black or brown, you know, listening, watching, like if you're out there, you know, with the protests, like more power to you and great job. But as soon as you see an instigator, if you will, from, you know, the white side who is lighting something on fire or smashing out a window, like that's when you need to immediately vacate and let those guys do that, and hopefully it's caught and exposed, whether on social media or actual national TV media.
But film a little bit first. Film a little bit first and then vacate, because we need.
They have.
We need the evidence. Yeah. We are not partaking in that, and I'm glad that you have celebrities like Questlove and DL Hughley and Jamie Foxx and all of them who are showing look, if you're gonna show pictures of people of color looting, let's also show the pictures of pale ones that are looting, and make sure it's an even playing field.
I believe the term is non-melanated.
Non-melanated?
Yes.
Let's not fall for the okey doke. Because I saw a video of a young brother who was like, look, and he was in Minnesota, and he was like, look, this stack of bricks was not here yesterday. And it was like a 4-foot high stack of bricks. That all of a sudden just showed up overnight. They're planting ammunition for you guys to go out and use to freaking pillage and cause a ruckus. Don't fall for the okey doke.
Yeah.
I think we should go back to
and
where
that's
best. That way, because nobody wants to mess up their Jordans.
Well, they don't care about Jordans now because they're just gonna break into a Foot Locker and steal some more. So,
yeah.
Look,
yeah, man.
When it's all said and done, I'm thankful for having this platform. I'm grateful for the fact that we've been doing what we've been doing for as long as we have, and we've been able to provide an outlet for others and to kind of be able to be a source of motivation and enlightenment. And I guess the main thing that I've been trying to push and preach is organization and having alternatives, and going back to removing toxic language. I want to try to keep people in check, Black people in check, that is saying that there aren't certain things and resources that exist, because there are. There have been a lot of grassroots movements and a lot of people that have been on the forefront and have been pushing the line and pushing the issue, and they have businesses and they offer resources for us. We just have to find it, you know what I mean? Especially when it comes to buying black groceries, Black-owned stores, Black-owned, essentials, Black-owned, gun associations, just Black everything. And again, I want to check people that are saying, oh, we as Black people don't have X, Y, and Z. And it's like, no, there's people all around the world, you know what I mean? And there's factions and groups and organizations that have information and resources and do provide all of these things, as well as individuals that are in the belly of the beast, you know what I mean, that are a part of the American system that are working on our side. So I want to encourage individuals, everybody listening, including ourselves. I've been actively working on it with eliminating generalizations. And again, like I mentioned, being very specific on who I'm talking to and talking about, and making sure that what I'm saying is contextualized and isn't misunderstood. It doesn't leave any room for misinterpretation, right? And I want to encourage everyone to do your research, find the Black-owned companies that best benefit you and serve you, and do your research and get away from generalizing certain aspects of what we're dealing with right now by saying, Black Lives Matter is this, or it's like, no, there are certain individuals that participate this way, saying that all Blacks are doing this way, or Blacks don't. Get away from generalizing, and very specific. Or even on the flip side of that, to be fair, saying all police officers or say certain individuals, you know what I mean? And I get it that all officers kind of fall under that umbrella because they have that blue line, and it seems from face value, out of our ignorance, that when these situations happen, that there's all officers are protecting them. And it's like, I get it, but at the same token, we don't know the individuals that are on the police force and what they're dealing with and what they're fighting against to combat the corruption that's happening within their force.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm pretty sure that there's layers, just like we mentioned, that it's going to take time and legislation, and it takes, you know, levels to kind of get the change that we need, and that we expect to be able to hold these individuals accountable. But again, I think it's a disservice when we kind of group all of them together and, you know, throw them under the bus. And the reason why that becomes toxic is because those individuals that don't have the mindset that we do, what they'll do is they'll take that as ammunition, and then it's, you know, F all police. When it's like, no, there's some that are on your side. There's some that are trying to work with you and work for you, and they want, you know, there to be a relationship. You know what I mean? And again, the anger is towards the system of policing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and again, if we eliminate, you know, again, what I've been preaching is alternatives. If we say, yo, let's get rid of this whole system, then what? You know what I mean? What are we then plugging into? We're asking somebody to not shop at a particular store, then what? Where are they going to go? You know what I mean? And we need to be able to provide that information and those resources to them to say, hey, don't eat at or don't support this corporation. You can support this Black owned, or this, even if it isn't Black owned, it's somebody that is grassroots, that supports Black issues, and they don't, you know, that they're in line with our movement. You know what I mean? Like, they're allies. You know, we need to be able to provide that information and provide those resources. As well as, again, the policing system. If we eliminate the system of policing, then what? You know what I mean? Are we policing ourselves? Because again, something happens, somebody get ready to break into your house, the first person you call is who? You know what I mean? Personally, I'm working on being able to be Jamaican in my house. You know what I'm saying? I personally will call the homies. You know what I'm saying? But then again, there's also a system in place that if the homies show up and we get into some activity, I don't want to speak on it, but we need a system. I don't want to. Yeah.
And piggybacking off of your point, as far as like, you know, supporting allies. Like, if we're supporting allies, you know, in businesses, because, you know, as a Black community, we don't have a Black-owned resource. Supporting those allies will then work in our favor when they go to support us even more, because those allies are going to be like, look, they're spending dollars in my business, so yes, I'm going to continue to help advocate for them in, you know, whatever their needs are.
Yeah.
And
be educated when doing that too, and hold the allies accountable as well, because it's easy. I think a lot of times going back into that pacification, we settle for people that just kind of do things for the gram. You know what I mean? Like, they just putting it up to show that they're on our side, but they're not really putting in the footwork. Like, they still benefiting from the privilege on the other side, or they're still invested into oppression, right? But holding them accountable, even if they're Black owned, hold them accountable to say, hey, I'm spending money with you. When issues come up, these are our expectations. Or when there's something that comes up and we need your help, these are our expectations. When we want to protest or we want to do this, we expect you to be a city of refuge. You know what I mean? Which is probably one of the biggest issues that I have with, you know, Black churches. We'll get into that. That's a whole nother segment.
A whole show.
That's a whole nother segment. You know what I'm saying? So, do your research, be safe, take care of yourself, understand what you're saying, understand what the movement is, and understand your part. Your part may not necessarily be being on the front line. Everybody ain't gunners. You know what I'm saying? Everybody isn't, you know, an educator. Everybody isn't, but understand what your role is, and then push that line. You know what I'm saying? Whether it is educating people on financial literacy, whether it is providing resources, providing, you know, avenues towards, you know, whatever the case may be, whether it is being in law enforcement, whatever that may be, understand what your role is, and then communicate with others and provide those resources with others. Because I think we all need to understand that everybody doesn't have our mindset. There's other people that are sheep, that are looking, and they're on the fence, and they're easily influenced, and the first piece of information that they receive, they're going to jump out the window with it. And that can be very dangerous. And it can also be counterintuitive to the overall goal and agenda that we as Black people trying to get our human rights recognized and trying to be incorporated into constitutional rights that don't necessarily apply to us. It can destroy our entire agenda in pushing for those things, because then you will ultimately encourage somebody that doesn't know any better to go do something that is reckless, do something that is destructive, and then it will hurt everybody, because then it puts us into a trap. It puts us into an agenda by the powers that be to say, oh, look, now we can push the National Guard over there, put a curfew on them, and let's lock them down for even more and make this more of like a prison. You know what I mean? And then we're back at square zero. And then those that were, on our side that, we're trying to help and didn't know any better, now they lose faith. Now they lose hope. Now they lose trust. And then we're trying to build that back up again. So again, just be conscious of what you're doing, be conscious of what you're saying, and be well. Take care of yourself. You know what I mean? These are very critical times that we're in, and I'm hoping that 200 years from now, when we're in the history books, and needless to say, this actual video on our podcast may exist in the atmosphere somewhere, or maybe in outer space, wherever the energy that we're projecting is. I'm hoping that they're able to be I'm hoping that this isn't an issue, and again, that starts with us now being able to make educated decisions. So
2020 is going to be a hefty chapter.
We barely halfway through. We'll be halfway through. I mean, we're halfway through now.
Yeah.
Halfway through now.
In terms of people trying to figure out what their part is in all of this, maybe it's just something as simple as, reaching out to someone you went to school with, someone you work with, or a family member, and say hey, how you doing? How you holding up? I had a couple athletes, former athletes or whatever, reach out to me just hey, I understand you're probably going through some things because you're a Black man, just checking on you, and I'm so appreciative of that, just because that shows me what kind of understand. Well, it shows me that they understand, but also shows me what kind of impact I've had on their life just through coaching them in track and field. Right before we jumped on here, a girl I went to high school with, young white lady, she sent me a message hey, I've been kind of struggling the last few days trying to process this, but I want you to know you are loved, and I'm starting to understand. And it's it's, you call it baby steps or whatever, but
incremental change is better than
change. And so it's maybe it's just maybe it's just people that aren't willing to go protest or take more action. Just be a listening ear to a young mind who's struggling on how to release this bent up anger and frustration. Because you being a listening ear, maybe that's all they need to get that off their chest, and they're not then out there on the street smashing a window or setting a car on fire or whatever. You know what I mean? You can have just as significant impact on the movement. But I will say, the privileged white people out there, the best thing you can do is help with the voting and the legislative process in making human rights equal. And I'm stressing human rights versus civil rights because, again, for me, my standpoint or my opinion, since a lot of this thing started becoming public in 2014 as far as police brutality, human rights, let's look at it from a human rights perspective and just leave it at that.
And with that, if you are a white individual, if you know a white individual that is uncertain or doesn't understand their privilege and how to use it, I encourage you to help them, spread the word, because at the end of the day, you know what I mean, this wave and these individuals that aren't like us may end up at your front door, and it could be too late, and so and again, I'm not condoning that, I'm not trying to encourage that, but I think it's very important that we play a part in trying to educate individuals that are out there that are aware or unaware of the possibilities of growth and change, or privilege and being able to help others. Was talking and found it very ironic how not everybody, let me be careful, how there were certain individuals that spoke against Barack Obama and talked about, socialism, or even Bernie Sanders and all these socialists and blah, 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 blah. And then we get into this COVID thing, and those same principles of socialism or communism and bartering and looking out for others almost kind of went into full effect. You know what I mean? Where you started to see those things come into fruition. All of a sudden now it was okay, right? Whereas before you were totally against it. It's like little things like that. Try to be aware of, just be aware, you know what I mean? And find ways where you can help people, because it is very possible, it is very possible. Listen to the other side and try to get an understanding. And that goes for both Black people and white people with privilege. Listen to each side, you know what I mean? Like, granted, yes, it's okay to have emotions, but I think it's very key to listen and understand the other side, so then therefore you can become most effective. It's a game of chess. Understand the other side in a sense of getting a better understanding of why they feel the way that they feel, why they're acting the way that they act, especially when it comes to having privilege. You know what I mean? Understand why those white people have a privilege, so then you can then better articulate your point and help them to break up that conditioning and that lack of understanding of why, they don't understand their privilege, or how they can better utilize their privilege within their communities. Because just going in with the rah-rah type of energy, again, people will turn that off. You know what I mean? And they'll dismiss it. They'll turn, and then that basically leads into the lack of empathy, and then you won't see the results that you require. So yeah.
I think one last quick point I want people to understand is, I forget, it's either like elementary school or junior high school, middle school, like, we're taught about fight or flight.
Yeah.
And, in situations of police brutality, like, they will instigate something by being slightly aggressive, and the natural response for a human is they'll go into fight or flight mode. So like the whole resisting arrest, well, like, you pinned a man's arm behind his back and slammed him against the wall. Like, his natural reaction, human or animal instinct, is to
fight,
resist and respond and defend themselves.
Right, especially if they didn't do anything, and we've seen time and again that
if they feel wrong, then that level of defense like goes up exponentially. But when we're looking at the uprising and the looting and all that kind of stuff across the country, it's the masses saying, you've pushed me to the edge where my fight response mode has now been activated.
Yep.
And just understand, like, for the people who are looking at, the news and saying, why are they doing this? Because you've pushed people to a breaking point, and they're now fighting back.
Yeah, people are at a fever pitch right now.
And that's the plain and simplest way I can explain it for those who have a hard time grasping, like, why they're seeing looting and rioting on TV. Why are they seeing people like throwing stuff at police officers? Like,
I've seen a nigga steal a police horse.
Yeah, bruh. But I mean, it's like, look, my freaking 9-year-old daughter sat and watched a man be strangled. And, you know, how many other kids of color have watched their family member, like, because police showed up to a party or to their house or whatever, like, be shot, or like, that's traumatic. So it leaves an impression. And so when they become adolescent teenagers who are like got freaking going through puberty and they've got all this adrenaline, like, and they feel like all those raging emotions from their childhood come back, you see windows get smashed out. It's not complicated to understand.
It's not. If you have any basic understanding of human behavior, if you are a human, you should be able to register to some degree why people are doing what they are doing, instead of making the excuse that, oh, black people are criminals and that's why they act this way.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand it, watch Animal Planet, because they'll show you what animals do. We are
all animals.
All animals. And we're just more intelligent. Well, some of us are. Yes, all the shade, all the smoke. Well, apparently we lost Foz, but I think we were getting ready to sign off anyway. So,
yep.
Like we always say, do your research. Hopefully this conversation and dialogue help spark some thought and ideas that you can take away and hopefully put forth to some good use moving forward.
Yep. And hug a black person today.
Yeah, if you can't hug them, call them or text them at least. You know, hit them on social media.
Oh yeah,
shoot them a
social
DM.
distancing. Virtually hug them. Because coronavirus is still a thing amidst all of this.
Oh yeah, that's right. We're still in a pandemic.
A pandemic amongst a pandemic.
Yeah, that part. All right, this is The Kickback Show, thekickbackshow.com, The Kickback Show on all your social media. Wavecap Johnny on Instagram. Shout out to Organic Blackberry.
Tiana Giovanna across the board.
And Swivel on Instagram. DJ Swivel on Twitter. We'll see you guys next time. All right, y'all? Peace.